Make it happen while you still got a chance. Make it happen, do a little dance. Come on.
Welcome back to Make It Happen. My name is Dan Bracken. I am the communication director at Ginghamsburg Church, where this beautiful podcast is being recorded. And
I'm John Worledge, the co-host along with Dan Bracken. I'm the online campus director here at Ginghamsburg, and looking forward to what we get to talk about together.
Now, season 1 came about because John and I kept getting caught in conversation and eventually decided to hit record. And beyond that, I think we've decided that this podcast is designed to be helpful for church practitioners, to encourage anybody who is interested in bringing the gospel to people in new ways. We want to get you off the fence. This is to help you make it happen.
Yep.
Some new technologies can be a little scary. Do they have to be? I don't know. Should they be? I don't know. We'll get to talk about that in this upcoming season and more, because there are so many new things to talk about in the world of technology. There always is. John and I were in Texas last year, and we heard from an engineer at NASA who shared with us that 90% of all scientists to ever live are alive today, coinciding with the exponential growth of population in the world. So think about all of those incredible scientists that you know of who have contributed to human society and civilization, the Albert Einsteins and the Isaac Newtons, so on and so forth. 90% of all the scientists to ever live are alive today. And that same exponential growth in population coincides with the exponential growth of patent applications. And so the rate of change that we're all experiencing is very, very real. What you're feeling is legit, but we're here to help. Where should you invest your time, your resources, your money, your talent, and how can we leverage all of these emerging technologies for the gospel and sharing the good news of Jesus Christ? There is a big difference between core values and cultural practices, right? Core values do not change. These are the things that the church focuses on century after century. Things like serving the poor, loving your enemies. It's like Apostles' Creed kind of stuff. The things that hold the church together over the course of time. Our mission, right? The gospel. But cultural practices, on the other hand, change all the time. And I think sometimes, maybe even more than sometimes, the church gets the two confused. We assign spiritual value to cultural practices, and then we become resistant to change when those cultural practices expire or are no longer relevant to reach new people for Jesus. And so that is our focus today with this podcast and for future episodes, is to differentiate between core values, cultural practices, to help the church practitioner to figure out how to use emerging technologies to reach new people for Jesus. And today, we want to talk about artificial intelligence. Right, John?
Bum, bum, bum. I feel like it needed a bump, bump. Because
Yes.
that's how people are approaching it. I mean, we have heard so many people who are already thinking that the robots are taking over. And there's kind of this idea of how is artificial intelligence going to change the way we live? How is it going to impact people's livelihoods? How is it going to replace everyday tasks that we have been doing for decades and centuries that are now able to be done in a split second because we can type a prompt into an app or onto a website? So how does that how does that affect how we live? How does that affect how people live? And it can be scary. Like you said, change is hard. People don't like to change, but at the same time, it's how can we leverage it? How can we not be afraid of artificial intelligence? How can we use it for the mission? How can we use it for that's one of the questions that we want to talk about today, is how do we use artificial intelligence in a way that can point people to Jesus, can more clearly articulate the message and hope of Jesus? And so how can we do that?
You and I had received a grant from the Texas Methodist Foundation to explore virtual reality. We purchased some Quest 2 headsets for the church, and then 6 months later, all of those headsets wound up back on the shelf. We couldn't find the incentive to get back into VR. It didn't really meet our expectations in a way we felt like it would be a helpful tool yet, right to ministry. But then I remember, too, another turning point in the conversation was when ChatGPT came onto the scene, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, wait a minute, okay, VR is still on the shelf. It's still a possibility, but this AI development is something that we really need to pay close attention to. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, like, it has blown up, and the year following has been full of rapid advancement in AI. And so, rightfully so, it has been demanding conversational attention among church leaders. And so, is it a threat or is it an enhancement to ministry? Well, to help us answer this question, we have a very special guest in the studio today. His name is Jason Moore of Midnight Oil Productions, and he's in the studio with us today. Jason's an incredible artist and content creator, graphic designer, illustrator, motion designer, but more than anything, he has a heart for the church and is a big advocate of using visual communication to enhance the gospel, the good news of Jesus. So, Jason, dude, at this point, you and I almost go back 20 years.
We do. It is good to be back. Crazy to think that I was sitting in this building 27 years ago as a staff person doing graphic design and all of that, back when we were like on Photoshop version 1 or 2 or something like that. I don't even know if we had layers back then. But
that's how
but
old
yeah,
he is. He
you
just
know,
revealed himself.
Yeah, I'm an old guy, and I have been passionate about helping the church communicate the gospel through the latest and greatest tools, not for the sake of the tools, but for the sake of transformation. And I really love what you said in your intro about not confusing core values and cultural expression. In fact, that's something that the pastor we both serve with, Pastor Mike Slaughter, often talked about that, the idea of the new wine and wineskins, and that I just see AI as a new wineskin. And, sure, there's some things to be nervous about. I never had to worry about the screen becoming self-aware and enslaving humanity. And, sometimes I'm a little concerned about where AI might eventually go. But it's here. And unlike those headsets you talked about, it's not going away. This isn't a fad or a trend that is going to be, we're going to move on from it in 2 or 3 years, unless, an EMP shuts down all of technology or something like that. And so I just think we have to, as the church, embrace the moment, whether you're curious, whether you're convinced, whether you're dead set against it. I think we have to understand it and know what it is. And I think the biggest responsibility we have right now, I think, is to help our congregation navigate their faith in a world where AI is going to be everywhere. When you get on the web, all of the applications that we have, all of the things that we interact with these days now have a little label on it that say powered by AI. One of these days I'm going to pick up a deodorant stick and it's going to say powered by AI.
Artificial scent.
Yeah, there you go. Yes, artificial scent for sure. And so it's only going to be more interwoven into the culture that we live in. And so I think as the church, we have a responsibility to help people navigate their faith and even their lives outside of the church with these tools. I think we've all experienced in our faith times where we pray and it doesn't seem like God has answered our prayers. God is often answering our prayers, just not the answer we're looking for. And, AI will always give you an answer. That answer may be wrong, but I am a little bit concerned about this magic machine that you can go to and it will always give you some sort of answer. And what happens in the world around us when we can become over-reliant on this technology and sort of forget that we should be going to God with our concerns. And I think that's true with creativity too. Like, I don't think our creativity should always start with a ChatGPT screen. I think we don't want to lose our creative muscles, for those to atrophy because we're so reliant on AI. So I think as we talk today, how do we take a balanced approach? I am absolutely a proponent, and I use this stuff every day. Yeah. but I do think we've got to use it with some restraint and caution and wield it carefully.
Yeah. Okay, so for like a hot minute, you were an expert on hybrid worship, right? And then the conversation changed. What happened? What changed the conversation to focus the church from hybrid worship to AI?
Yeah, I wish that more people are in that conversation. As you were saying early on, a lot of people are just scared. What happened was we moved away from what has been known as traditional AI to generative AI. Traditional AI has been around for a long time, analysis and, recognizing patterns and fraud detection and all that. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was scheduling some flights for vacation for my family, and my account is used to me scheduling flights because I travel a lot. But when I try to schedule 4 flights, my card wouldn't go through. And then I got a little notification that thought that maybe some fraud had been, taking place with my card. And I had to put in a code and, do some things, and I was able to buy the flights. But, there's not a human being sitting in front of my account, refreshing the screen, trying to see if anything weird is happening. AI has been driving that for a long time. And believe it or not, the first chatbot was actually introduced in the late 60s. So this technology, AI, has been around for a long time, but it turned a significant corner in November of 2022 when ChatGPT came out. And for the first time, we had really usable and fairly intelligent artificial intelligence. And so it went from being something that seemed far-fetched. And when I'm doing my trainings on this, I talk about how I grew up loving Star Wars, R2-D2, C-3PO, all those robots and droids and all that. But then also one of my favorite shows as a kid, and I'm dating myself here again, was a show called Knight Rider with Kit, the Knight 2000, the self-driving intelligent car that could speak to you, and it had every bit of information that you could ever need at its disposal, and it could drive itself. And our cars don't jump over things like Kit could do, but all that far-fetched stuff from my childhood is like a reality now. I mean, Tesla has done most of it, so all of a sudden, for the first time ever, artificial intelligence is something that I think could actually benefit us. And I had this scary moment where I'm sure you're familiar with, your listeners may not be, but there's an application called DALL-E 3. It's an image generator. You put in text and you describe what you want to see, and it will generate an image that will sometimes, most of the time, oftentimes, look like what you hoped it would look like. Not always. With too many fingers and maybe an extra limb or whatever, but it's a little weird sometimes. But I think it was August of 22, if I remember right, they had put out a brand new version of DALL-E, which was DALL-E 2 at the time. And they had this new feature they were touting called outpainting. What outpainting would do is that you could upload a picture and then draw a box sort of on the outside of it. And the AI would look at what was there and it would draw in what wasn't there. So it would sort of extend the frame. Now in Photoshop, they've got something called generative fill, which basically does the same thing. And if you've not ever encountered generative fill, it has saved me so much time. I mean, it's incredible what it can do. But anyway, I uploaded just a little square of the Mona Lisa, and then I put a little box next to it, and I put in the prompt, Da Vinci style mountainside or something like that. And it basically extended from Mona Lisa's left shoulder on the right side of my frame all the way over mountains that looked like the same brush strokes and the exact same color. And it was as if Da Vinci had painted that right on my screen. And so I spent, an hour playing with it. And by the time I was done, the little square in the center was the only thing that was the original art, and everything else around it looked like it was painted by Da Vinci. And my heartbeat started to beat a little bit fast. I started to sweat a little bit, and I just thought, did I just witness my extinction?
Yeah. It's fear setting in.
Yes, because I'm like, gosh, if you don't need me anymore, like I could do what I just did, and it probably would take me 3 days to do what it did in an hour. But the more I engaged with AI, the more that I saw that it was a more sophisticated toolbox. Part of my story was that I grew up a traditional artist. I could draw fairly photorealistic. People used to hire me to do portraits and paint pictures and charcoal drawings and all that kind of stuff. And then when I went to art school, I was scared to death of Photoshop. I thought, I don't want to lose all my skills as an artist. Like, if I put down the paintbrush and the pencil and I pick up a mouse, am I going to forget how to draw? And it didn't take me long to figure out that like Photoshop just allows me to draw in a way that's even more realistic, and I can bring my creative vision to life. And AI is a much more sophisticated version of that. So I have done all sorts of really fun experiments. You guys are Facebook friends. You see them quite often. And one of the regular things I do at my training, I call it Mid-Journey Mad Libs. And I'll ask people for a subject, sort of a noun, but person, place, or thing. But give me a person. What do you want to see? And then what is that person doing? And then people yell something out. And then I'll say, okay, so where are they at? And then they'll give me, a place. And then I'll say, okay, what time of day is it? And so like I get these images, like the last one, I think they wanted Jesus and the Easter Bunny drinking coffee in Paris at sunset. And I prompted that, and you would not believe the 4 images it gave me.
That's how I want to celebrate Easter.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's life transformational stuff right there.
Yeah.
But and actually, the one I did just 2 days ago, John Wesley on a pirate ship eating ice cream. And it was like, if you didn't know it, you would think we would have gotten a period actor and took him out on a boat and, got the best ice cream we could find and prompt that. And so the beauty of all of it is that the upside, there are plenty of downsides that we can talk about, but if you can dream it, you can make it. And you can make it for almost nothing. You guys, I would imagine both, I know Dan, this is true for you, with stock photography. If you've ever had to buy stock photography and license it, you know that like one stock photo, even with limited licensing, can cost you like $30 for one image. I mean, it can be more than that too. You can buy a Midjourney account for $25 a month or something like that, in that range. So for the cost of one stock photo, I can now make pretty much anything that's in my head. And a lot of the things that we might want to illustrate in our sermons are really hard to find stock photos. Like biblical stories don't often translate very well to stock photos. You get really, really bad, people that look like they went to HalloweenCostumes.com and bought a Jesus costume and a fake beard, and he's standing on a boat or whatever, and it looks cheesy and not great. With AI, you can describe that scene in a way that it is almost undetectable that it's AI at this point, which again, I think is a potentially good thing.
During the Super Bowl, there were 2 He Gets Us ads.
Mm-hmm.
And
You read my mind, John. You read my mind.
we're making it happen right
Guys
here.
are in sync.
But so we've had conversations with people in our Discord server that 100% without a doubt were convinced that those were AI driven. Mm-hmm. They were AI generated. And Dan, you actually did the research. You found out who the photographer was, how they did it. But so the conversation that we then had, the AI was getting the credit for someone else's work, and something that someone invested a lot of time and effort and energy and resources, and yet it was being credited to some kind of a software program.
And not only that, but in a way that weakened the message,
right?
Too, right?
People
so the
lost sight of the message itself because they were convinced that this wasn't real.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the things that we've had the conversation around. And you made the comment. You said, with just a few minutes, I have it at my fingertips. So
Yep.
how does kind of the ownership of that? Like we know there's a lot of gray area around that, and obviously with everything with the writer's strike in Hollywood recently, the Actors Guild strike, a lot of their concern is around AI. So how do we in the church, if we create a generated image How does that affect, like, how do copyrights work around that? How does ownership work around that? Like, how can, as an artist, how do you monetize that? How do you avoid kind of infringing on copyright law?
Well, I think it's a great question to ask. I have a million thoughts that I could share with you on it. A couple different things I'll start with. First is that I went to art school, a school specifically geared toward commercial art. So it was not the art that we were trained to create was art for the purpose of communication. And so with every project I turned in when I was in art school, I had to turn in references as well. I had to show what I was inspired by. Obviously, you couldn't just rip off somebody else's ad and put your text where theirs was and put your photo where theirs was and, that kind of thing. But you had to sort of figure out what is the essence of this and then why, how can I use that to communicate my idea? When I was an art student, I thought, this is stupid. Like, why do I have to do this? I just want to create something. But what I realized after graduating was that makes the work that you do relevant to the culture, the design culture that exists around you. And so I guess the first response I would have is that artists are trained to look at what other artists do.
Yeah.
And even sometimes to capture the style of what other artists do. And so when we ask AI to create something that is in a certain style, it's not all that different than what has been done before. Now, there has been some controversy over the way that AI trained to make images. The technical term, which is appropriately painful, is that it scraped images all across the web. And in the early days, and back in DALL-E 2, or maybe it was even DALL-E 1, when you prompted for something, oftentimes a Shutterstock logo or some form of it would show up, bits and pieces. So you'd prompt your image and it would have like a watermark sort of on it that looked like the Shutterstock logo. It wasn't that, but it often looked like that. A lot of that data, I think, has been jettisoned. I don't think they're using that anymore. DALL-E 3, which is part of ChatGPT if you have a pro account, now says that when you prompt something, they've changed the rules to say that you cannot prompt using an artist from the last 100 years. So they don't want to do harm to artists who are currently still making art. So
like public domain laws, basically.
Yeah,
music,
basically. Yeah. And so I think that there is we are working toward better ethics around these things. I always tell people, though, you get to choose what you prompt.
Right.
So I can use restraint and not say, hey, create this in Dan Bracken style and potentially harm Dan Bracken, although I don't know if it trained on your art, Dan. But I do think that we can be, careful about how we are prompting. So that's one part of this conversation. And the other thing I would just say is that every generative AI company so far that does image generation, and it was like they were knocking them down like dominoes, came out one after the other saying, we will guarantee what you create is not going to get you into any copyright trouble. So OpenAI 1 week said it. The next week, I think Google said, we will defend you in court. If your image is ever lands you in court, we will pay to defend you because we stand behind. Midjourney did the same thing. So they are standing behind what they've created. Here's another interesting little tidbit. There was a court case where somebody was trying to take the art that they created out of Midjourney and copyright it, and it was determined that AI-generated art cannot be copyrighted. So if I create it and you use it, I can't really do anything about it because it's not generated by a human being, except that when you create a derivative work, that can be copyrighted. So if I generate an image of, Jesus, surfing in California, in Maui or whatever, and I've generated an image like that before, which is silly, but I I have the rights to use it, but you have the rights to use it too. There's nothing I can do. But if I were to take that image of Jesus and cut it out and put it on a different background and add text to it and do some other things, then it becomes a derivative work, and that is copyright. That's my understanding anyway, is that becomes copyrightable.
So, very specific question from Pastor Dennis, senior pastor here at Ginghamsburg. Yesterday in worship design team, I was presenting some concept art for an upcoming series after Easter called United in a Divided World, right? In my mind, I thought it would be neat to generate an image of a dystopian picture of the Statue of Liberty and a pile of rubble, but like pieced back together with tape and glue, right? So it did. I wrote the prompt and it spit out this pretty cool image. And I'm like, oh, sweet. And Dennis said, so can we like sell that? Is that ours? Whose is that? And I said, well, I'm comfortable claiming the prompt is my own. The filter's not mine.
Yeah.
Right.
My understanding is, well, first of all, you probably could sell it. But you probably,
especially if I take it then into Photoshop and make it
and do something else with it. I think you could probably even sell it if you generated it, but you probably couldn't do anything if I took it and put it on a T-shirt. If it's purely AI generated. Mm-hmm. Again, I'm not a copyright attorney, but my understanding is that. Well, I'll tell you this: I see videos all the time on YouTube about how to make money with AI, and people are creating these seamless patterns that crafters like to use. So, and they sell them digitally. So they'll go into Midjourney and they'll say, create a seamless pattern. You can even upload a reference image and say, oh, I noticed this one sells really well. So create something that kind of has this feel, and then you can upscale it and upload it and sell it. Yeah. So I do think that, I don't think you'd have a problem selling it. I do think that if you haven't done anything to it, then it might not stand up in court if you tried to stop someone else from using it. But let me offer you one other thought, which is a thought that I know a lot of people have had around AI. This He Gets Us campaign really, for some people, thought this isn't authentic because AI created it. I did a training back in August of this year in the Holston Conference of the Methodist Church in Tennessee. I was in Knoxville. And I was partnering with this pastor who was going to preach on Jeremiah 18. That's the story where Jeremiah is looking for a word from the Lord, and he goes to the potter's house, and the potter's crafting something at the wheel, and then whatever the potter was making became misshapen and marred, and the potter took that clay and formed it into something new, and that's when this aha moment happens, and Jeremiah realizes that we are like clay in the hands of the potter. That's the word he got from the Lord in that moment. And so the pastor that I was partnering with, I was there to do a day training on collaborative worship design, and then we were going to create an Advent series the next day using everything I taught them the day before. But then that night, on Friday night, we wanted to offer a worship service. So the pastor was going to use that particular text, and as we were preparing, he said, hey, I got a story from my life that's a lot like this that I'd love to tell in the sermon. I'm saying, well, tell me. Tell me about it. And he said, well, I was 13 years old. My parents took us on vacation to this Native American reservation. I'll be honest, as a 13-year-old kid, I thought, this sounds dumb. I don't want to go. And then we went, and he said, I didn't want to tell my parents, but it was kind of cool. And I'm sitting in the middle of this sort of almost like an amphitheater kind of thing in this Cherokee village. And without really even announcing a show or anything, this Native American chief kind of came out, full regalia, headdress on, all that kind of stuff, and took some clay and put it on a wheel and began to pump that wheel with his foot. And there were benches, and people started sitting down. They were watching him do this, and he's kind of crafting that. And all of a sudden, the wheel starts spinning too fast, and that clay started to wobble, and it broke into 3 pieces and fell off the wheel and hit the ground. And he said, we just sat there breathless. Nobody said a word. And he went and he collected the pieces, and there were bits of grass and pebbles and dirt and debris in it. And he took those 3 pieces and brought them back together and began to pump that wheel again. And then he formed it into something. And he said, by the end, like what he had created was beautiful because it had all these little marks and marred stuff. But he said, that's just stuck with me for all these years. And I said, that sounds awesome. I said, do you have any pictures from that vacation? And he's like, Jason, was 13 and we didn't carry cameras in our pocket. We didn't have iPhones back then. So no, I don't have a picture. And I said, well, do you mind if I generate one with AI of what you just described for me? He's like, no, I'm fine with that. So I generated this image, and I wish I had it to show to you. And it was pretty breathtaking. And I even prompted it in a way that I asked it to be as if it was shot on a Kodak Instamatic camera. So it has kind of the muted, kind of bluey tones and the sepia, almost sepia, but it's color, you know. And it really captured that feel from when he would have been there, like from the 80s. So I like to watch the room when I'm running the media for something like this. And when he told that story, he began to tell the story, and kind of at a key moment, I brought the image up, and you could hear sort of an audible, you know, reaction to that, like, wow, you know, like, oh, that's cool. And they didn't know it was AI. And so the next day, I offered a little workshop for some of the. We had 2 or 3 workshops I could go to before we did our work together. And some of the crowd came to my AI workshop, and I said, now, I want to show you the image that you saw last night and how I prompted it. And that was AI. And people in the room, some of them, their mouth dropped open. They couldn't believe that was AI. And I said, well, how does that make you feel? There was and I didn't break it down into percentages, but there was some portion of that room that was like, I don't care. Like, that brought that story to life for me. It was one of the most powerful moments of the sermon last night. Mm-hmm. Somebody else said, I don't know. It just doesn't sit well with me that's not like the guy, and that's not like the.
Like they felt duped. Or
yeah, something. A little bit like that. And then something popped into my head that again, it's sometimes just the Holy Spirit working in the moment. I instantly had this memory of, as a kid, I grew up about 5 blocks from my United Methodist church. And I guess I must have had a happening summer that summer, because every once in a while I'd go down to the church and hang out with the church secretaries, pop in and say hi or whatever. And just so her name was Millie, which is like the perfect United Methodist church. She's exactly the way you're picturing her in your head right now, you know, kind of from a different era. And she was awesome. And I went in, and she said, hey, can you put these letters on the pastor's desk, this mail in the pastor's desk? And he was out to lunch. And so I went and I dropped those letters on his desk, and sitting on his desk was a book that said 1,000 illustrations for preaching and teaching. And I opened that book up and I started to thumb through it, and I saw these illustrations for sermons, and I was like, wait a minute, I remember when he told this story, and I thought that was like his family vacation, or, you know, whatever the story was. It was like he had used that illustration. And for a second, it didn't sit well with me, because I thought, that's not authentic. And then I realized, the more I thought about it, the more I reflected on it, I thought, I've remembered that story for the last 3 years, and I still remember the sermon connected to it. And then I think when you take that conversation a little deeper, you think about, did Jesus really know a guy who had 2 sons, and he gave his inheritance to one early and the other one stayed home? Or was he telling us a story that would help us understand the nature of God and maybe see ourselves in it? Are we the prodigal son that went away? Are we the son that stayed home? Are we the father who is waiting for our prodigal child to return? And so, you know, I don't know if those stories were real or if they were imagined, but I think that if they help us connect with the gospel, with the good news of Jesus in a way that is deep and meaningful and transformational, then the source doesn't, whether it's AI or not, if it moves you to transformation, then I think it's worthwhile. And by the way, does it matter if I go find a stock photo for that, or I generate it with artificial intelligence? It's the same, ends.
Cultural practice versus core value.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
I think core truths of the gospel, no matter how they're communicated, are still core truths.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. Back in my day, when I was here, Mike Slaughter used to often say, all truth is God's truth, which I think is a quote from Constantine, but not Mike Slaughter necessarily, but he would remind us of that, because sometimes we would get flack here when we would do a secular song way back when.
Okay. With that, okay. Matrix, Easter, 1998. Were you here for that?
I helped plan it. It was the last thing I did. I created the video, but I left before Easter actually took place.
I mean, I know that kind of blew up a little bit.
Yeah. So the problem with all of these things,
It's the same conversation as today, right?
it is. And the problem with all of these things, including AI, is that AI needs to serve the gospel, not the gospel serve AI.
Agreed.
We don't want to use these tools because they're the latest and greatest, but because they can better help us to communicate the gospel. I quote all the time a 2008 study that finds that we are 65% visual learners as a culture, and learning increases a whopping 400% when you use image to teach. AI just happens to be a great way to generate images that are exactly what you're trying to describe to help people move.
And that's not PowerPoint slides with a bunch of text on them.
Right. It's not clip art.
Right.
It's not emojis. But yeah. So, I mean, as long as the gospel remains the forefront, it's not the cart before the horse. We're not using AI. We're not trying to find ways to use AI because we can. We've got to continually ask that question. Should we? Because we can do just about anything. But there was one series that I was a part of here, not in my time as a volunteer years ago. It was an At the Movie series. And we had a moment where we did something really creative. In fact, I have a projector, and we projected scenes from the movie Frozen onto a wedding dress as someone was singing. And Pastor Mike said to me at the time, "Wasn't that really creative? That was really great." And I'm like, "Yeah, but I mean, why?" I think we've got to be discerning.
Discerning is a good word. That's where messaging can get really tricky.
3 simple rules: do no harm, do good, and stay in love with God. And I think about AI. This is a perfect overlay. We ought to look for all the ways that we can use AI to do good. And there's so many of them I could share that we haven't gotten to yet. But one of them is by bringing the gospel life through images. And then to think about, even in those images, AI is not biased, but the humans that create things that AI trained on are biased. Mm-hmm. So if you type in Jesus, it's going to give you a Anglo-Saxon guy that looks like he's from Alabama that is Jesus every time. You can prompt around that. You can make Jesus a Middle Eastern person. Or my favorite, what I always did at Ginghamsburg, make Jesus a silhouette. And then you can imagine the face rather than trying to put our own face on Jesus. So you can do good. You can help people see themselves in these stories by being intentional. You can do no harm by thinking about those biases and by the way that we communicate the gospel and taking everyone's story into account. And the third one I think is so important. I kind of mentioned this a moment ago, but that we not go to AI first. Like if we stay in love with God, then AI becomes a secondary way. It's a secondary tool, but we can, I believe, because these tools are so powerful, that we can make it our God, where we always go there first and we always start there and we preach our sermon from there. And like AI should not be exegeting the text for you. You should be exegeting the text and then use AI to help you take that further. But there's a difference between starting and saying, "Hey, what does this text mean?" and write me a sermon, and saying, "Okay, I'm going to wrestle with this. And here's what I've ascertained this means. Let me check that against what are some of the ways that other theologians have looked at this text." And it's sort of like going to a concordance, but you're using AI to do it. And so I think we ought to not fall in love with it and make it our first, our foundational piece every time we do ministry.
I mean, I know that when you're afraid of something, it occupies your thoughts in the same way.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're afraid of AI, maybe you've already made it your God in a similar way.
Yeah, there's some truth to that. And you reminded me of one other thing I just recently wrote. When I was a kid, my dad took me to Kings Island, which is not far from here, a incredible amusement park. And maybe before I was ready, I don't know, he took me on a roller coaster and it scared the heck out of me. And for the next 15 years, I didn't get on a roller coaster. Huh. And I heard what people said about roller coasters. That one's really scary. And I watched from the sideline and saw how scary it was. And it always made going to theme parks hard because I'd go on the spinning rides, but I never go on roller coasters. And then when I was on staff here, Lynn Wilson and I and his wife and my girlfriend, who is now my wife, all went to Cedar Point, and they were like, come on, just get on this one coaster. It was the end of the night. Got on the coaster. It was incredible. I was like, oh my gosh, that was awesome. Let's go. We tried to ride like as many as we could with the 45 minutes we had left. And the next year I went to 7 theme parks because I wanted to make up for 15 years of not riding roller coasters. But I think that the point of the story is some people have tried ChatGPT once and they weren't very impressed because they didn't know how to talk to it. And it gave a very vanilla output that was like, this is useless. Or they used it and it scared them because goodness, that was so good. Like, could this replace me? I'm just encouraging people to give it a fair shot, to give it one more whirl. We can't ignore it. It's not going away. So what does it look like for us to give it another go if you're scared?
So with ChatGPT 4, you can create custom GPTs,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I've collected all the information about all the events that we have at the church, put it in a spreadsheet, uploaded it to ChatGPT 4 in a custom GPT that I've developed to help me write host scripts.
Yep.
I can then also upload our voice and tone guidelines as a general reference for ChatGPT in terms of knowing what words to use, what words to avoid, And then I've also uploaded the 19 or 20 most recent host scripts that I've written myself, so it gets a sense of how I write,
Yep.
how to organize content in terms of the call to worship and the connections information and the send out, And then I say every week on Friday, okay, it's time to write next week's host script. Bunk, hit enter, and then it can actually like date reference the spreadsheet, and it can give me a draft. It's definitely a draft.
Yeah.
It maybe gets me like 35% of the way there, right?
Yep.
But it'll spit it out, and then that at least gives me a framework that then I can start going back and forth, and that's how I use it as an assistant or a starter.
Yeah.
Prompt for me as a writer.
That's a great way to use it, because in some of the conversations I've listened to, they've related it to an intern that you have on your staff.
Right.
And in our context, you wouldn't take a seminary intern and you say, hey, you're preaching Easter Sunday, good luck.
Yeah.
You would say, hey, we want you to preach a sermon, but come back to us. Let us help you. So using it as a tool, because I think that's where a lot of people are getting hung up, is thinking that the robots are taking over. I think I might have said that earlier,
Yes.
but it's really approaching it the same way we've approached the projector, the way we've approached the camera, the way we've approached online worship. It's a method, it's a tool.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be the be all end all. And so I think helping people's perception.
That's where I talk about really the idea of exercising restraint,
Mm-hmm.
because you can just go with what it spits out,
Mm-hmm.
and it won't be very moving or excellent, even when it learns to write in your voice. So like, I lay out right in the beginning of my book. I'm writing a book about AI, and I'm going to be honest in saying that I'm using ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini to help formulate thoughts or clarify or research or whatever. And what I've done is the same thing you've done. I uploaded my entire Both And book. I've written all the articles I've written about AI and all that. So it has that as part of its knowledge base.
Yeah.
And it helps to write like a first draft, which is really helpful. I'm sure you've experienced this, Dan. It's got a lot of phrases that it likes to use over and over: tapestry and delve, and
A testament to our shared belief.
yeah.
Unwavering commitment to the nurturing values of blah, blah, blah.
Yes. So you add those to that other documents, like don't ever use this again.
Yep.
I wasn't, when I first started working on the book, and I was using it to kind of get, first drafts going and stuff, I wasn't as aware of it as I am now that I'm 3/4 of the way through it. And every time I see it say a tapestry of blah, 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 it's like tapestry is one of its favorite words. I'm like, I'm so sick of so then I had to go back through the whole book and make sure that the word tapestry doesn't actually end up in it somewhere. But
It likes the word profound.
Yeah,
too.
profound
Yeah.
a lot. Yes, yes. And
Hearts full of gratitude and eyes set on the horizon.
yes, and this journey of blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But and the thing is it'll get better, and it learns, and all of those things. But what I just say to folks all the time is that you get to be the ultimate decider in what you use and what you don't, and you don't want to let it work or do the work for you. Let's not farm our ministry out to AI, but there are certain things we can farm out. So I'd lead these AI cohorts. Usually there's about 10 churches in each cohort. I'm on number 3, and I'll be starting another one after this weekend. And I have some friends that are kind of in the industry that I do these bonus sessions. And one of my friends is a gal named Ashley, or Tennille, I'm sorry. Her legal first name is Ashley, but Tennille Whaley, and she is the liaison to the government for AI and quantum computing. So her job is to like help the government figure out how do you regulate this, and she's high up and understands.
Yeah, easy job.
Yeah, easy
Super
job. Easy job.
Yeah.
But she has been awesome in coming in to help lead some conversations around ethics, because that's part of her job, is to think about ethics. And so she talks about 3 buckets that we ought to consider when we think about AI. The first is things that AI can do for us. The second is things that AI can augment our work. And the third are things that only humans can do. And, when you think about the announcements, they almost are in that first category, things that AI can do for us, although you are augmenting. But like sermon research, some of that is stuff that AI can do really well. And rather than having to go to a shelf and pull down 10 books and spend a half a day reading through all those things, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm saying that it might take me a half a day to do that, and it might take me 5 minutes to go to ChatGPT and ask a question about the historical context of Nazareth, where Jesus grew up or whatever, and it can give me all kinds of insights that it might take me a long time to find. Or like one example, I've used it to do some series planning to show people how to do that. And I asked it for some secular movie clips. And one of the secular movie clips that it came up with was from The Lion King, the presentation of Simba to the animal kingdom. And it was basically for a week in this series about Jesus' miraculous birth. And someone said in one of my trainings, well, will it tell you where to get that scene at? I said, well, let's ask. So I asked, where is this scene on the DVD or on the, and it said on a DVD copy or on streaming copies, it's usually going to be from 00 to 3:45, and like telling me exactly where the time code is. Now, sometimes AI makes stuff up, so that might, I know in this case that was right, but I think about what we used to do here was I'd go rent 3 or 4 DVDs and spend a half a day trying to find, is there a scene here? Yeah. What is the time code? And then, preparing that for worship and all that.
You just wanted to watch movies all day.
That was the hard part. It's like sometimes you get hooked. You're like, I love this movie. Now I just watched 40 minutes of this and I was only looking for a 3-minute clip or whatever, But all that is to say that on the things that AI can do for us or even do with us, think about the other ministry you can do now, because you don't have to spend a half a day looking at DVDs. If it can find that for me in 5 minutes, if it can go like the series that I often demonstrate is help me plan a series about Jesus' life, starting with his birth and ending with his death and resurrection, but I want to focus on his miracles. And it will immediately spit out, here are 6 miracles that Jesus performed. The amount of time it would take for me to go do all that research, look for all of his miracles, look up every verse, might take me a couple hours, and in a minute, AI can do it for me, which means that in that hour, I can go serve at the soup kitchen or go work with my youth or, prepare a Bible study or visit someone in the hospital.
I think your view of humanity is a little romanticized.
That could be. That could be. I'm an artist.
I hope not, but yeah. Yeah. Which, it makes me wonder about the underlying felt need of AI and why it's taking off so rapidly, right? I think there is an attractiveness to convenience,
sure,
and efficiency, but I don't know if I would go as far as to say it's so that we can do more. I think there's a sense of busyness in our culture of burnout, a lack of vacationing and Sabbath, that I think maybe if you got real honest about the deep felt needs of AI, it's so that we can take a break.
Well, there's no doubt about that. One of the things that has happened in this last couple of years as we all had to jump online. I've had so many pastors tell me like, I'm this close to quitting. I can't do this anymore. I had one pastor friend of mine say, if they bring masks back, I'm done. I can't be the mask police anymore. And one person told me I looked for 3 jobs this week And if any of them had paid any better, then I would have left the church and gone because I'm just exhausted. So yeah, I think that there is certainly an opportunity to use those time savings for rest and relaxation. I also think that, it does give us the opportunity. We can choose how we use our time. I'm not particularly wired. I'm not a clergy person, but I'm not particularly wired to be the one to go to the hospital and visit people. But for some people, that might be a respite and a moment of just pulling away, but also doing ministry at the same time.
Well, small church ministry, right, where you're the pastor, you do everything.
Yeah.
Why not outsource some of what you need to do to a tool who can do it for you because you don't need to.
I'll just share one other thing, and these are kind of my 3 guiding principles, and they all kind of relate to each other. The first one is just to think of AI as not a do it for you, but a do it with you. If you farm out your ministry, if you basically give your agency over to a computer, then I think we will miss something along the way. So now that contradicts a little bit what I just said a moment ago. There are certain things that AI can do for you. But generally speaking, I think AI should be a do it with you, not a do it for you.
Well, it's the same with Photoshop.
Yeah.
I mean, I learned that from my graphic design professor in college back in 2004, maybe. Don't let Photoshop's a great tool.
Right.
Don't let it do the work.
Yep.
You do the work, it'll enhance what you do. Yeah.
We've all seen those summer blockbuster movies that are more about the special effects than the story. And the story is only maybe sort of there to serve the special effects, and the special effects don't tell a story. So, kind of same deal with AI. Don't farm it out and let AI do it for you. Yeah. The second thing that I say a lot is that AI is a conversation. It's not a query or a command if you're using it properly. Meaning that I can go to AI and say, write me a sermon, and it'll do that. That's a command. Or can you write me a sermon? That's a question. That's a query. And it'll do it. But the more I help it understand, I want you to play the role of brainstorming partner. Okay. How can I help? What do you need from me to be successful? And then it'll say, tell me about your target audience. Tell me how many weeks are in the series. It'll give you some clarifying questions, that kind of thing. So have a conversation with it. Help it to understand what your desired outcome is, what your goal is, your theological perspective. The more you give it, the better it's going to give you in understanding what you're after, and you'll create the content will be more rich and more usable. And then the last one, maybe the most important one of all, is that you have a soul and AI does not. You have Jesus. The Holy Spirit resides within you. It does not reside within AI. But when you bring your soul to the conversation, then the soul is present in the conversation, and that's where God can work through AI, and you're the vessel in that moment. It's not, God isn't using AI. God isn't partnering with AI to do a thing. God is partnering with you, and you're using the tool of AI. So when you bring your soul, you're a co-creator with Christ. It can be your shovel. It can be your hammer. It can be your paintbrush, your pencil, your whatever. And I think that's where God does God's best work.
Thanks, Jason, for being with us today. Man, I really appreciate it. We have, John, so much to talk about still.
I know.
So much to talk about still.
I'm looking at our list of talking points.
Hey, I'll come back.
Okay. Yeah. Hey,
yes!
There we go. We got it. Part 2 coming soon. Part 2 coming soon. Look, practical AI tools to help you do ministry, AI solving big problems. Are we entering the post-truth era? Just like the internet captured emerging multimedia under one umbrella, what is it that's capturing our new emerging technologies? AI, VR, AR, LiDAR scanning, Web3, haptics, Unreal Engine, graphene? Is it gaming? Is this the metaverse? What about wearable and biotech? How close is a matrix reality? Honestly, that's kind of scary. I just taught somebody in our church the difference between email and a web browser. We need to process this. We need to process this. John, you know her. God bless her. She's amazing. I love her. How concerned should we be about the wealth and knowledge gap with advancing tech in the church? Is AI for the rich and the poor? So many questions still to unfold. And so I hope you join us for the next episodes and the episodes after that and after that and after that and after that. God bless you. Make it happen. You have the tools at your disposal to reach people for Jesus. Let them know about the love of Christ and the love that God has for them. Talk to you again soon.
Didn't try to break the mold.